Good evening, folks.
We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you, one that will provide several hours of pleasurable relaxation and diversion for you and your family. We hope you'll make this a weekly visit. Bring the family, bring your friends. We hope you have a wonderful time. Come back soon.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Knights of the Pageless Library. This is an audiobook discussion podcast. I am Ryan Knight, and I will be your host for this episode. And on today's episode, I'm going to be taking a look at Wool, Book 1 of the Silo Saga, written by Hugh Howey and narrated by Edoardo Ballerini. Before I get too far into the review, I just want to remind everyone that if you want to join the conversation, please feel free to email me. kotpl.pod@gmail.com is by far the easiest way to do that. However, at this point, you can just Google us and you will pretty much find us on any platform you'd like to get a hold of us. I also have to give a quick mention. I actually received my first donations on Buy Me a Coffee, so my first whiskeys were purchased over there. So to those of you who graciously donated real money to me, I just have to say thank you. I am so incredibly grateful. You know who you are, and I know I'll be talking to you again, but I just have to say it. Thank you so much for giving me your very, very hard-earned money. I could never say thank you enough. I listened to this book through Audible, so just to make that clear up front, but if you have anywhere else you like to get your audiobooks, please feel free to share those with me so that I can share them with the audience in case somebody does not want to support Audible, which I would completely understand. The Silo Saga was started back in 2011 by Hugh Howey. Book 1, Wool, coming out in 2011. The audiobook version I will be listening to was released in 2023. Hugh Howey has a lot of titles under his belt, at least on Audible, which I'm all about the audiobooks over here, so that's what I'm going to be taking a look at. I'm showing 47 results for him. Some of these may be duplicates in other languages or re-releases or things like that, but that's still a lot of titles for one person to have on Audible. Looks like he is mostly known for his science fiction and fantasy, literature and fiction, and mystery, thriller, and suspense. So he has 3 whole categories that he garners titles in, which is pretty impressive. This is the first Hugh Howey title that I have listened to, however, so I would be curious to know, based on this book, what some of his other work is like, because, well, I'll tell you how I feel about it as we go along. Before I get too terribly far into the review, what do I think about the narrator, Edoardo Ballerini? I have actually listened to Edoardo Ballerini before. He narrated The Inn by James Patterson and Candace Fox. I liked him in that book, but I think I like him a lot more in this book. I think that his range of voices is very good. I think that his tonality fits this book incredibly well. This is a little bit more on the dark side, and I think that his tonality fits this title perfectly. I think he has just enough range without just straight up reading the book to you like a robot, and I think his characters are recognizable. Especially when there's a lot of characters talking. I tended to know exactly who was talking simply by the way he pitched his voice, which is, in my opinion, an incredibly good skill for a narrator to have. Hopefully, without going off on too much of a side tangent, I have seen a poll on Facebook that was asking if people preferred narrators to do voices, or if they preferred full cast productions, or if they preferred the narrator simply read the book to them without attempting any voices whatsoever, just as plain, monotone as possible, read them the book. And since I don't know how to operate Facebook very well, I can't even find the poll that I'm referencing, which is terrible journalism. But based on what I can remember, I was surprised to see that a lot of people actually prefer narrators to just simply read them the book. I am not one of those people. I would much prefer a narrator at least attempt to give me some characters, especially in a book like this, where there are a lot of characters that I'm going to be spending a decent amount of time with that I would like to get to know a little bit better. And I think Edoardo Ballerini did an excellent job of bringing those characters to life. And he had a decent amount of time that he was expected to do that for. This book clocks in right at 15 hours, which is a pretty solid listen. I've said it many times, and I'm sure I'll say it many more, but I think 10 hours is right about the sweet spot for most books. That's kind of the spot that if somebody, I don't know, maybe if you're picking your first audiobook, that would probably be a very, very comfortable spot for you to start. That sounds very weird and corny for me to say, you know, how to start with audiobooks, but I honestly think that that's something that could scare a lot of people away. If you pick up a title that's 50 hours long and you are not used to sitting and listening and trying to pay attention when somebody's reading to you, that could be something that turns you away from audiobooks, and I personally wouldn't want anyone to be turned away from audiobooks. So that's just a suggestion I recommend for people kind of starting out. You know, pick something right around the 10-hour mark. This book actually wouldn't be too terrible for a beginner, but I'll get into that a little more here in a minute. Now, what kind of is Wool? Because based on the title, it would be very difficult to assume what this book is. Wool is a post-apocalyptic drama centered around a few main characters who are living in what is known as a silo, a large cylindrical tower buried deep in the ground in order to house the last of humanity. This book goes very heavy on descriptions, and it actually goes very deep into characters. There are actually moments in this book where you will feel for these people during their struggles, and the descriptions can get a little bit graphic at times, so if you have a weak constitution, you have been warned. Now, that's obviously just my very quick notes that I wrote before this so that I could give a very, very brief description of what this book is without hopefully spoiling too terribly much. But this is definitely a post-apocalyptic book, and I can't necessarily say that this is sci-fi. I think that post-apocalyptic drama is about the best description I can give for this, especially without having listened to any further books in the series. I do not actually know where the series is going. And if you have listened to the series, or think that I should listen to it, please share that information with me, because I would like to know if this is something I should move forward with. Especially considering it looks like there are at least 9 main books in the series at this point, and 3 short stories also based on this, so a lot of content. Alright, so a couple of the main things I like to cover on this podcast. Is this book easy to follow? Maybe even if you're doing something else, or you're daydreaming, or you're doing some other task, maybe you're listening while you're at work or something like that. Is this book easy to follow while you're doing those things? I don't think this one is. I think that this book is written well. I think it's told very well. I think it's narrated very well. But overall, the story is pretty complex. We're going to jump back and forth between a couple main characters, and we're going to get heavy descriptions on a lot of things. A lot of the book is actually taken up, I feel like, with descriptions of things. And to me, that's not a negative point. I actually very much so enjoyed it, especially on my subsequent listens of this book. I found myself really liking the deep descriptions that we're getting of what's happening to these characters, because I really felt myself getting into the story and being able to very easily visualize what is going on. That being said, I think a lot of that lends to this being a bit hard to follow for that reason. If you zone out for a minute, 2 minutes, yes, you might miss a lot of descriptive stuff, which might not necessarily mean you're going to get lost in the story, in the overarching story of what's going on. However, you're not going to be able to be as invested as you should be while you're listening to this book, if that makes sense. The location jumping and the character jumping is going to be, I think, ultimately what would lead you to get lost very quickly and really catch yourself asking, wait, who is this? What is happening? Who are they talking about? What are they talking about? I'm not necessarily saying you need to sit in a quiet corner and just listen to this one, but this might be a better title to listen to maybe while you're driving, maybe while you are doing some kind of task that you don't need to focus on, and where you can focus on listening to the story, because there is a ton to be gathered from this story, and I wouldn't want you to miss any of it. Is this book easy listening? Absolutely. Now, that might sound confusing based on what I just said on is it easy to follow, but around here we kind of like to split the two things up, because easy to follow and easy listening to us are two separate things. Easy listening is mostly based on the narrator's performance and the storytelling overall in this one. And I think those two things go very well hand in hand in this title. Edoardo Ballerini's performance in this one really, really sells that point, in my opinion. All right, so what are some pros and cons to this book? The pros, I would say, are the setting. I think it's very well done. It's very engaging. It's going to leave you asking, wait, what's going on? Wait, they're not going to tell me in this book, and I got to wait for another book, which could be a good or a bad thing. And I think in this one, it's going to be a good thing. I think there's a lot to look forward to in this series for me. The descriptive language, I think, is a pro in this book. I think this could potentially, coming from somebody who doesn't know anything about writing, but knows a lot about consuming books, I think this could be considered a masterclass on how to use descriptive language in a positive way, especially to where it doesn't bog down the story. Now, I'm going to be kind of hypocritical here and just say one of the cons for me is our main character, Juliet. She has sort of an engineering and mechanical background based on what she does in the silo for her job. I'll get a little more into that once I pass the spoiler wall. But Juliet attributes every single thing she does back to that background of hers. Now, that on its own is not necessarily a bad thing. I myself am a mechanic. However, I don't attribute every single thing I do in life to the things I know about being a mechanic. I think Hugh Howey walks an interesting line with this one because his analogies are very good, and it is good for her character. I think it's very fitting of her character, and it gives us a real insight kind of into her mind and how her mind works. It's kind of see, I'm not a writer, so I don't know how to say this, but what comes to mind is it's a very rigid yet fluid thought process. Maybe somebody else who's a mechanic might understand what I'm saying, that our thoughts have to be rigid because the things we're usually working with are rigid things that must fit together well, but we also have to think fluidly in terms of problem solving because typically the problems that arise with mechanical things, it's rarely going to be the exact same thing twice. So you really do have to use a fluid thought process to fix these rigid items. Dang, now I don't know if I think it's a con or if it's a pro. Maybe I think that it's actually a pro for this book, how he actually wrote Juliet's character with that in mind. I would say my overall recommendation for this title is a resounding yes, you should listen to this book. It's a very engaging book. It walks a lot of very good lines without too many red herrings to kind of throw you off of the what's actually going on. And any of the red herrings we get are actually because the characters themselves are seeing red herrings, which is pretty nice to see. The quote-unquote wool is not just being pulled over our eyes, but it's actually being pulled over the character's eyes as well. It's kind of nice to know that we only know as much as, say, the main character Juliet knows. And for a lot of the story, she is actually in the dark as well to what truly is going on. And again, I don't know 100% what's going on because I've only listened to the first book, but I know there's a lot more to come. So there you go. That's my overall recommendation on this one. Now, if you're new here, I'm going to pass the spoiler wall, so I'm going to just kind of talk about the story, what I liked, what I didn't like, and I'm going to kind of ruin it if you don't want it ruined. So if you don't want it ruined, please pause the podcast now. Go listen to this title. I would recommend it, but please come back here and hear what I have to say about it. Thank you if you've stuck with me this long, and if you pause it here and you forget to come back, I'll forgive you this time. All right, so how is Wool told? Wool is kind of a third-person book, so we're mostly going to be getting the narrator telling us what people are doing, where they're doing it, and how they're doing it. And a lot of the book is going to be centered around Juliet. It doesn't start there, though. I'll get to that in a second. This book, as far as I can tell, is set in a post-apocalyptic future. Now, I don't 100% know that. I don't remember for sure if it was mentioned in this book what the actual date is, but I'm assuming that this is set in a somewhat near distant future to probably even when the book was written. So if it was written in 2011, there's a good chance he might have thought that 2024 would look like this future. Okay, so I think I might have misspoke a little bit earlier because I guess I was not quite remembering that this book technically consists of 5 books, if I'm looking at this correctly. And I do now remember that it is broken up into parts. I just assumed they were parts, but I guess they are considered books. So Wool consists of books 1 through 5, according to Wikipedia. And they are as follows: Holston, Proper Gauge, Casting Off, The Unraveling, and The Stranded. And yes, if you're wondering, I'm going to be leaning a little bit heavily on Wikipedia for a bit of a summary here. So if there are parts where you're like, hey, it sounds like he's reading that directly off Wikipedia, I may very well be, because I'm going to have it up on screen, because it's been a minute since I listened to this book, and I've also listened to 3 other books since I listened to this last, so my memory is fuzzy on the best of days, so it's going to be a little hard for me to remember a lot of details, and I want this up just so I don't miss any important stuff. All right, so this book opens up on a pretty dire note. So Holston is the sheriff of this silo, and I want to say it's Silo 18, and that's all that we get to know in the beginning, is that this is Silo 18. Now, this book doesn't come right out and say it. Hey, this is Silo 18. This is where all these people live because of some catastrophic event that led them here. No, we are just going to get a lot of show don't tell, and I really do appreciate that. Holston kind of lets us in on the idea that he has to go out and do what's called cleaning. He talks about how his wife went and did this thing called cleaning. I think it was a few years before him, but he has decided that he himself is also going to volunteer to go out and clean. We get a little bit of an idea that from inside of this silo, you have all these screens that show the outside world. As far as we can tell, the outside world is a desolate wasteland. The silo cannot see much above what appears to be, maybe they are in like a sunken crater, but what they can see from their vantage point is that it's basically all desolate, rock, maybe some scattered weeds and grass, but nothing that looks like you want to go out there. And they're told that outside is completely toxic. The air is no longer breathable, and you would die in a very short amount of time if you were not wearing a special suit to allow you to actually survive outside. So Holston decides that he's going to go through with the cleaning. So his job is to get in this suit, go outside, and wipe off those cameras that are allowing everyone to see outside. As far as I know, there are no windows that allow you to see outside of the silo, only the monitors from inside. Now, something I want you to remember, keep this in mind, that this book was written in 2011. And keep in the back of your mind how kind of scary this is when you can only see through a screen something that someone else is telling you is real. And now apply that to today, 2024, and realize how truly scary that situation might be. So when Holston goes outside, we actually are told that he doesn't see a desolate wasteland. He actually sees that there are trees, there's lush grass, it's beautiful outside. So this actually makes him realize why other people who go outside and say that they won't clean, there's no way they'll clean, they're just going to leave. This is why they decide to clean, because maybe there is life outside of the silo. Maybe it is worth preserving the silo so that everybody can survive to see this world. So he goes and he does his duty and he cleans. And then he attempts to walk away to where he remembers his wife going, if I remember right. He goes to try to find where her body fell, because inevitably everybody who goes outside to clean, they die. Apparently the suits cannot last long enough for them to accomplish the cleaning and make it back inside. That's also a point that's worth remembering. And at this point, Holston decides he's just going to wander off, right? Maybe he doesn't want to go back to the silo. Maybe the world is beautiful and he can leave. And at this point, he actually needs to take off his helmet. And once he does realize the visor inside of his helmet was a screen all along. And the images he was seeing of this lush environment were actually a screen he was looking through, and it was projecting that onto the world. The world really is toxic. It really is desolate. It really is destroyed. And he ends up dying right alongside where his wife's body fell however many years before, when she also went out to clean. Now, up to this point, we'd only gotten a little bit of clues as to why his wife wanted to go out and clean. She mentions things about the screens and about pixels and about things that you could change on a screen. So those are all good things to keep in mind as well. And a lot of this went completely over my head the first time I listened to the book. It wasn't until actually like the second or third time I listened to this that I was fully gathering how important these details in the beginning are all the way throughout the book. And I think that's something that sticks with me, at least with this title, that there are a lot of details that don't get dropped. They do come back up later, and I really appreciate that about this one. So we skip ahead a little bit following Holston's death, and we get Mayor Johns and Deputy Marnes. And now they're talking about how they need to go find a new sheriff. Mayor Johns already has someone in mind who is down on one of the deep floors, the deep down as they call it. She's from engineering. So they set off to go down deep where a lot of the mechanical stuff is stored in the silo. We're talking generators, pumps, cooling systems, all that kind of stuff that you would need down in the belly of the silo. On their way down, they stop in the IT department and they talk to Bernard, who's the head of IT. Now, IT rests somewhere, I believe, in like the 30s floors, the 30th-ish floor, something like that. So they're not too terribly far down. And IT is obviously responsible for all the computer-based things throughout the silo. They do, however, get their cooling and venting and stuff like that from mechanical down even deeper. I don't know if it's ever fully said, but there are the couple of different departments that I kind of sussed out were mechanical, IT, supply, farming, all the things you would kind of need to run a basic community. It all exists within this silo. Now, Sheriff Johns and Deputy Marnes both are older. They're in their golden years, I guess. I don't know how old that actually would be in the silo. I don't know if people live as long in the silo. But either way, this trek that they're going to make down they talk about how difficult it's going to be because it's all stairs, all the way down and all the way up. And it's going to take them multiple days to get all the way down to the bottom where Juliet is. And Juliet is their top candidate, at least based on Mayor Johns' recommendation, I believe. And Bernard is actually annoyed when they say this because he has a candidate already lined up that he wanted to put in the sheriff's position. And the head of IT is apparently supposed to work hand in hand with the mayor. Those basically the mayor, the sheriff, and the head of IT are the three most important people in the silo as far as I can determine. So keep that in mind though, that Bernard was upset by the fact that they're not wanting to even talk about his candidate and they're just going to go down and try to give Juliet the job. On the way down, they stop and they talk to Juliet's dad, who she has not spoken to in a long time. We basically get the idea that Juliet is an extremely hard worker. She never takes time off. She basically never wants to stop working. She stops just long enough to sleep, and even that is a stretch for her to want to do. But when they finally get down there and offer Juliet the job, she's actually annoyed because she doesn't want the job at all. She just wants to stay down there and keep the silo running. She knows that the silo needs everybody in mechanical working at all times in order to keep things moving smoothly. Juliet reluctantly accepts the job after she is given a promise that they will actually do a shutdown so that Juliet can repair the generator. From what I gather, they actually only have one generator running the entire operation here, which to me sounds like a terrible idea. I would have thought there was at least 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, I don't know, way more than one generator that you would rely on to run this post-apocalyptic civilization-saving thing that somebody planted here. I do like this too a bit because we find out how meticulous of a mechanic that Juliet actually is. And I, being a mechanic in real life, am super impressed by her skills, her technical skills, and the dedication that she puts into her job. And I wish I could be more like Juliet. Let's just put it that way. On their way back up, they stop and they talk to Bernard again, and they let him know that there's going to be a power holiday, I believe is what they call it, in which they're going to shut down and they're just going to run on backup power while the maintenance is performed. Bernard is actually so annoyed by this that when Marnes and John stop to sleep, they get a little we get a little bit of character on them. They apparently have had feelings for each other for a long, long time that they never acted on until this journey right now is kind of what I gathered. But Bernard allows them to fill their canteens. And when Mayor Johns takes a drink of hers, she starts getting sick. She starts feeling ill, dizzy. I can't remember, she pukes. Basically what they kind of determine is that Marnes' canteen was poisoned, but he shared his with Mayor John. So somebody was trying to kill Marnes, and, most things would point to Bernard being the one who did this. But since there's no sheriff, we can't really follow up on anything yet. Shortly after Johns dies, then Bernard is elevated to mayor because that is the succession that has been left to these people, is that, like I said, the head of IT is actually basically the second in charge. So Juliet ends up accepting the job as sheriff, but now immediately, she's thrown this huge curveball because obviously Mayor Johns, who wanted her in the position, is dead, and she has to deal with Bernard, who clearly doesn't want her in the position. So Juliet spends quite a bit of her time when she first becomes sheriff just trying to get her feet under her, right? Figure out what she's even supposed to be doing as the sheriff, Shortly after Juliet takes over as well, Deputy Marnes actually ends up killing himself. She finds him, or somebody finds him, hanging in his room by his belt, which she thought would have been impossible, but he manages to find a way to do it. This could be interpreted as he hung himself with quotation marks, so I don't actually know that. I think he did kill himself because of the grief he felt with Mayor Johns dying. I do honestly think that he just saw life as completely pointless, trapped in this silo. Maybe the one person that he cared about was killed, and now he just can't deal with it anymore. The thing that does make his death pretty suspicious, though, is that right afterwards, Bernard puts his own deputy in place, and that is Deputy Peter Billings. And I believe Peter Billings is who Bernard originally wanted to take over as sheriff anyways. That's who he was grooming to take the position. So now Juliet has also been kind of putting the pieces together that something is amiss here, right? Bernard doesn't want her in this position. He wants his own guy in this position. He then tries to sneak his guy in there anyways, so now she's a little bit nervous because she's always got somebody kind of watching over her shoulder at every single thing she does. And she's actually doing a lot more than she's supposed to be. She's kind of digging, she's looking through files that she might not supposed to see, and she's butting heads with Bernard quite a bit too, because Bernard is basically trying to run the show because he is obviously the standing mayor while they wait on a vote for the new mayor. Juliet looks into things too, like Holston's death and Holston's wife's death, and maybe sees some things in the files that kind of tip her off that things are amiss, right? Basically what I'm trying to say through this whole thing is that things are amiss and Juliet knows it. And we pretty much know exactly what Juliet knows at this point. We might have a little bit more knowledge than she has because we see a little bit more than she does, just over her shoulder basically. But for the most part, she's an unreliable narrator because she can only tell us what she actually knows, and I do appreciate that about the story. Juliet ends up meeting a man named Lucas. She meets him late at night in what I can only assume is like the cafeteria or the kind of common area of the silo. He's up late at night because he actually enjoys watching the stars whenever you can actually see breaks in the kind of poisonous atmosphere outside. He's drawing star maps because that's something that interests him. Juliet is up late because I think she's getting a snack because she basically is still doing her sheriff duties as if she was doing her mechanical duties. Stays up way too late, super dedicated, only needing to get a couple hours of sleep a night. We should all try to be more like Juliet. They kind of hit it off, actually, Lucas and Juliet talking quite a bit, and she is kind of impressed that he's doing something like trying to watch the stars. She finds out he works in IT and that he's a little bit younger than she is. He's never married. He's never put in for, I believe they have to put in and apply to even have children. I should have mentioned that earlier, that there's only like an annual drawing to see who actually gets to have children, obviously so that the silo population is not overrun on their limited resources that they do have. We get to see the flip side, though, that Lucas is like Bernard's right-hand man, and Bernard is actually training Lucas to take his place. Now, I'm going to be jumping around here quite a bit because I don't remember the exact, events and exactly the way they went down. But what we actually get to witness is that Bernard shows Lucas that there's a little bit more to the silo than even he knows about. And in one of the server rooms, kind of behind the server racks is the way I picture it, it opens more like a door. It's like a false front server rack, and it opens like a door, leading to a ladder that goes to another room down below. Bernard shows Lucas that there is a radio transponder in there and a headset. And what that headset actually does is connect and allow them to talk to the other silos. Now, Lucas is kind of shocked by the fact that there are other silos, because up to this point, we didn't know that there was more than one silo. You could kind of gather maybe by the fact, and I could be misremembering this, but I think they do call it Silo 18. So you might gather by the fact that, if there's a number 18 and it's not just the silo, then maybe there are more than one. And I could be misremembering that. They might not even mention that until something that happens a little bit later. But so now, Bernard sets Lucas to his task, and Lucas's task is to read all these books and learn all of these manuscripts that are dedicated to furthering the future of the silo and the humanity that's left within the silo. And that'll become very, very interesting here in just a minute. Bernard ends up replacing Juliet as sheriff with Peter Billings. She actually is not sheriff for all that long, I don't think, in the grand scheme of things. And it's because she finds some information, and I think this is kind of what leads to this. she has a contact in IT that she asks to decipher some sort of message or code or something like that she found, and she doesn't understand what it's saying. So instead of having a runner, instead of writing this stuff down and having a runner deliver the mail, she sends him like an email basically and asks about this stuff. Well, he tells her to come down so he can talk to her. And he's freaking out. And he's like, this is something that nobody should be seeing. None of us should be seeing this. Where did you even find this? What is this? And if I remember right, it's stuff from Holston's wife before she died. And what this guy kind of says is he's like, this is code and information on how to change images on a very small screen. Something like 3x5 or something very, very small, which is not something that's very common in the silo. Well, Bernard basically says that he knows she routed all this stuff because nothing in IT basically gets past him. And if I remember right, the kid that she actually sent the stuff to in IT, I can't remember, but I think he ends up dying. Juliet also gets suspicious because she knows from her days back in mechanical that she thinks there's something wrong with the way that IT builds the suits. IT is solely responsible for building the suits for people who go out and do cleaning, and she thinks it's weird that anybody who goes out and does cleaning basically never returns. The suits always fail before they are allowed, or able, I should say, to make it back to the silo to come back in. Nobody who ever goes and cleans ever comes back. Let's just make that abundantly clear. And I believe it's at this point that Bernard actually frames Juliet, essentially, because he wants her gone. She knows too much. She's digging too deep. If she is allowed to stay, basically, she could upend whatever it is that he has going on, and whatever it is that kind of holds the silo together. And so I mentioned the thing with the heat tape because Juliet is put to cleaning, but somebody that she knows in supply makes sure that the tape that is used on her specific suit is some of the good stuff. And the only reason Juliet knows there's a difference between the good stuff and the not good stuff is at one point while she was working in mechanical, they were sent some of the wrong stuff, the stuff that's used to build the suits, and she noticed that it failed very rapidly compared to the stuff she's used to using in mechanical. So when Juliet is actually put to cleaning, it's a little bit more of an interesting scene. So she sees exactly what Holston saw. She goes out, but she knows she's not going to clean. In the beginning, they all say they're not going to clean, but most of them end up cleaning because they see this lush world outside. And they think that this is part of the illusion, right? Like I mentioned in the beginning, the silo is there to keep everyone safe for some reason that they might not comprehend at that point, but they know that the world is great outside of the silo, so they will decide to clean in order to maintain that future for those people inside. But Juliet's having none of it. She heads straight for the hill that is I think I mentioned this earlier, but I imagine the silo kind of sits down in a crater, so they basically, even from the highest floor, however high this thing sticks up out of the ground, I don't think it's very high, from their view out of the screens, they cannot see very far because of this kind of mound just next to them. So Juliet heads straight for this hill, and she goes straight over it and keeps walking, which shocks everybody inside. But before I get to what happens inside, I will just say that Juliet also realizes once she passes that hill, she starts to see a lot of things, and the visor on her suit starts to malfunction because it's only programmed to kind of cover up the things that they know about inside the crater where the silo sits. There is kind of a city off in the distance, and at first the suit kind of tries to paint over the city as if it's still there and still whole, but she notices that it can't do a perfect job because it wasn't programmed to do that because they didn't have enough information to paint over that stuff, basically. So then she realizes, of course, the world is shit, and I need to do something. She doesn't know what she's going to do yet. But she realizes that there's another silo. So she heads straight for this thing, and she heads straight for the door. And she realizes as she gets to the door that it's basically strewn with bodies outside. She goes into the airlock and makes it in there, and she realizes that's full of bodies. And even once she finally breaks in and gets inside, because her suit is starting to fail, even though it didn't fail as fast as the other suits did, it will still fail eventually because of the toxic air. She ends up breaking into the silo and getting the door open and getting inside and realizes that it's basically just dead bodies. So many dead bodies. And then we cut back over to kind of what's going on at Silo 18 after she leaves. And basically this is Bernard's worst fear. he ends up going and he ends up calling Silo number 1 and letting them know that they have a problem at Silo 18. This is also all things that are accounted for in these books that he is having Lucas read. So he flips to the part that lets him know what to do in case of a failed cleaning. Not just like a failed cleaning, like somebody went out to clean and they died before they could clean, but a failed cleaning. And it basically says, prepare for war. Essentially what a lot of the story is built on is the fact that so many people are kept in the dark about what the true intentions of the Silo are. Everybody kind of has a feeling that they're never being told the truth. You know, I'm sure there's plenty of people who just go along with the flow and they don't cause any problems. But it's at this point that basically some people are saying that because Juliet didn't clean, it's time to have an overthrow of the higher-ups. And basically the silos kind of ran from the top down. You know, the people, the quote-unquote people who run the show kind of stay up towards the top. You know, the sheriff and the mayor and stuff stay like on the top floor. And then the lower you go is considered kind of the dregs of humanity. And it's at this point that those dregs decide that they've had enough. Juliet was sent for cleaning even though they think Juliet did nothing wrong. Juliet was also an extremely well-liked person in the Down Deep. So you get a bunch of people from mechanical, a bunch of people from supply, and they basically say, that's it, we're taking this place over, and we're overthrowing from IT up, and we will run the show. And that's exactly what kind of ensues. They get guns, they go up, and everybody just starts killing each other. And it doesn't go well for anybody. What a surprise. Having a Revolutionary War type thing like that doesn't go well for anyone, regardless. A lot of people start dying, and not a lot is accomplished. But then we're going to jump back and forth now between Silo 18 and Juliet, because now she's at this other silo. So while she's in there, she kind of starts exploring around. The place is dark, it's hard for her, but it basically, for the most part, is exactly like her silo, so she knows where a lot of stuff is. Not long after, Juliet arrives at this other silo, though, and finds out that it's called Silo 17. I think she finds that out on her own, maybe she doesn't. Maybe she finds it out from this man that she ends up running into. He actually tries to kill her because basically he's shocked to see another person. They end up talking about it, and he calls himself Solo because he's been alone for so long there. Solo ends up showing Juliet the same room in his silo, Silo 17, that Lucas was shown in Silo 18. She finds the radio, and she ends up putting the headset on and realizes there's other people talking. Her and Lucas actually communicate, and Lucas keeps this information from Bernard because he knows that if Bernard finds out, then all shit will really hit the fan. Solo kind of shares the idea with Juliet that the silos, just like we might think of a silo now, is a place to store things for later use. That's what these silos are for. They are for storing the seeds for the future of humanity. Now, I don't know for sure if we find out how many there are, but he shows her a map, and it shows how many silos there are. I believe there's something like 50 of them. But he says you need to think about this, that this is just a small corner of the large Earth, and they don't know how far the whatever happened extends. But they kind of suss it out a little bit, and they realize that whatever was done, and Lucas especially finds this out, that most likely whoever built the silos knew exactly what they're doing. So think, nuclear war, some sort of natural catastrophe. Most likely it was a man-made catastrophe, and I'm assuming later on in the series we'll find that out. I'm guessing it was something like nuclear war that has caused major fallout. But before it happened, the United States or Europe or wherever they are at right now decided to try their best to at least allow some people to survive to guarantee the future of humanity. Juliet ends up doing quite a few things at this other silo. She starts to pump out the water that has flooded the lower levels because all the pumps have been offline for so long. While Juliet is down pumping out the water, which I might mention is a absolutely terrifying scene where she has to go down in basically a homemade diving suit, and she's trusting Solo to keep this little air compressor pump running while she's down there, which is feeding her air. The scene is honestly kind of stressful because after she gets down and gets the pumps going, she realizes that her air supply has cut off and she's gone a ways down in order to get to these pumps. It's a pretty stressful scene, and she does end up surviving, obviously, and makes it back out to find that Solo is knocked out. And this is when she finds out that they her and Solo are not even alone in this silo. There's a group of young kids, and what's interesting is that Solo says one of them is my age, but Solo is like 35. And Juliet realizes these kids are like young, 16, 17 or something like that. And Solo says that he's basically been alone for 20 years or 15 years or something like that. But Solo's kind of stuck still thinking that he is that young because there hasn't been other things around him to kind of show him how he's aging. It's an interesting kind of character trait that he has, and I do like Solo as a character. This group of young kids, though, also have like a baby. So basically life will find a way, even in this completely shut down silo. These kids are still finding a way to survive. After Juliet, though, kind of hears that basically Silo 18 is at war, she decides that the only thing she can do is she's going to go back. Bernard finds out that Lucas has been talking to Juliet and that she's still alive, so he's going to put Lucas to cleaning. Once Juliet finds out about this, I don't remember how she does it. I believe she repairs her suit. She leaves because she knows the exact time that cleaning is done every day. And when the doors open up, she goes inside and she has a fire blanket. And her goal is to stay inside the airlock chamber. And she knows exactly what'll happen is once somebody is sent to clean, they go into the airlock, the air is purged, and then they are supposed to go outside, and then the airlock is closed again, and then basically they incinerate it to incinerate anything that might have gotten in from the outside to basically sterilize that airlock room again. Her goal is to go in there and throw this blanket over her and Lucas in order to save his life so that she can go back into the silo with him and then try to basically put down the revolution, because now she knows all of this information and she understands the bullshit that's going on. She gets back into her silo airlock. There is a person in there, and she throws the blanket over them and she ducks down with them, and then she feels the intense heat from the incinerator go off. But for some reason, who she thinks is Lucas struggles to get away from her and actually gets out from under the blanket and ends up being incinerated in this fire. She assumes it's Lucas, so she's very upset. And once the fire subsides and the doors open back into the silo, Lucas is actually the one standing there to greet her. She's extremely confused and finds out that Bernard was actually the one set to cleaning. And a lot of this time, I think it's because Peter Billings, the guy who Bernard put as the sheriff once he fired Juliet, was a pretty suspicious person, and I don't think he actually ended up helping Bernard quite as much as Bernard thought he would. I should also mention, too, that kind of the way Juliet found out the whole Civil War was even kind of going on there in the silo is because some of the other people, basically who would have been on her side, ended up getting like a radio transponder, and they ended up hearing Juliet's voice and being able to get in contact with her, even though they didn't have access to the radio that Bernard was using. So it wasn't just like Lucas who told her everything that was going on. She kind of was able to bleed into these other radio waves and get in communication with other people within the silo. And I don't think they could actually talk to her, but they could hear her talking, which gave them hope, because then everybody knew she was alive instead of just Lucas knowing she was alive. So once she gets back in the silo after Lucas is like, yeah, get away from Bernard's charred up body, they tell her that even amongst all the fighting, there was still a vote put forth for the new mayor. And she's it. She is elected mayor. Now she's really jacked up because obviously she just got back. She's having all these traumatic events happening all at once, and now she gets the job of mayor. I'm sure she's so excited. But we all know Juliet's an extremely hard worker, and we know that she's probably going to succeed. And honestly, not a whole lot happens after that. We get just a little bit of kind of the end of the book with Juliet accepting, and then kind of the idea of what's going to happen going forward from the character's perspective. And then we actually get a little bit from the author, and he has a little blurb that he has at the end that he kind of answers some questions people might have about the books and the story and things like that. And I actually think it's kind of cool. So kudos to him. But yeah, that's pretty much Wool. I think that it is an excellent book. I honestly think that it's better the more times that I've listened to it. And I found myself comparing it quite a bit to a few other works that I know of. Namely like Snowpiercer, Helldivers. I think that I might actually do a full episode comparing these few things in the way that they tell a post-apocalyptic story, but kind of how the core idea is still the exact same. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I just kind of want to discuss it. So let me know if that's something you guys might like to hear. But either way, that is Wool, and please let me know what you guys think of Wool. I do think that this is a good story. I think it's a great post-apocalyptic story, actually. I thought it's a very cool setting. And I think what really grew on me with this title is the much more descriptive language that's used. The time that's given to actually get to know some of these main characters, get to know some of their quirks, maybe some of their flaws, versus just a purely heroic story where all we know is that our main character is a badass and they're going to win. Juliet is a badass, and we are rooting for her the entire time. But Juliet is flawed, and I think that that's great because that makes her much more of a relatable character than somebody who is never put into a tough situation and legitimately has to think their way out of it. Are there moments where, Juliet is simply saved by plot armor? Yes, of course there is. But it still doesn't detract from the story, and I don't think that it happens so often that it makes her less of a relatable character. But yeah, I guess I'll cut it there and quit rambling, so please let me know your thoughts. I really appreciate it. If you stuck with me this long, I extremely appreciate it, because I know your time is valuable, and there's nothing more valuable to me than knowing that you're spending that time listening to my not very lovely voice. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions, comments, concerns, praise, or whatever you might want to talk to me about. kotpl.pod@gmail.com is still the easiest way to do that. If you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you're watching or listening to this, please do the things that everybody else asks you to do. I'm not even going to ask you to do them because I know you know what to do, but it involves clicking just a couple buttons, which is free for you to do. I know it takes a little bit more of your time, but it might mean a huge difference for me. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it, and I hope to catch you in the next one.